coming up very shortly, but before that, we're going to, so today's only Zayin Amud Aleph, but we're already a few lines in. So we're already by the 2 dots, which is what, let's say 8, 9 lines down. Yeah, well, 9 or 10 lines in. So we're discussing the end of the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah said, Kama yoichal min atavel v'yechaya. How much tavel do you need to eat to be chaya? That's I was just thinking now of a question that Mr. Shaila is not like Maskana the Gemara see. The question isn't really just Kama yoichal min atavel v'yechaya. The question is how much from any issa, how much do you need to eat and in order to be chaya? But Akupanim, why it says tavel, maybe we'll soon see the way based on the Hemshech. But it could even be a discussion when I get to all Isuri Achila, how much you need to eat in order to be Chayav Makkos. So the Mishnah says Reb Shimon name a kolshu, but Chacham name a kazayis. So Reb Shimon says it's a mashu. Chacham say kazayis, like we know. When the Torah says lo soichal, not to eat something, you get Makkos for that lav. So then we're talking about a kazayis. That's the Chacham. Reb Shimon says no kolshu, right? And then the Gemara continues. There's a discussion backwards and forwards between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim, their arguments. So let's see now the Gemara has to say. The Gemara says like this: Amar Reb Bibi Amar Reb Bibi Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Reb Bibi said the name of Shimon ben Lakish. This is Reb Bibi's version of Shimon ben Lakish. Machloikas bechita. The whole machloikas between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan, whether you chayiv a mashu or whether you need a kazayas, is only when you eat an entire chita, an entire wheat, an entire kernel of wheat. Aval bekemach, but were you to eat flour, divriyako kazayas, then it would be kazayas. In other words, Rabbi learns the name of Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi understood Rabbi's version of Shimon ben Lakish. That opinion understands that the whole machlokes between Shimon and Rabban is not be'etzem. The etzem of Shimon is moida. Then generally you need a kazayas for Yisuri Achila. The only reason why Tavel over here is different and why it says chita, that chita is good enough, right? What's the words of the Mishnah? The Mishnah says that the kolshu, and then we continue by saying, right? The end of the Mishnah is the reason why chai for chita is because it's you're eating a whole chita, which is a barrier, and therefore you're chai. So that's what Rabbi says in the name of Shimon ben Lakish. So the whole machlokes is the chita, where you have an entire unit of something. Eating flour, everyone holds the kazayis. That's a bibi shit, the name of Shimon Lakish. That the Reb Shimon will be moide bekamach, and the machlokes is only bechita. But Reb Yirmiyah of Shimon Lakish, Reb Yirmiyah, however, says the name of Shimon Lakish. No, machlokes bezu, kach machlokes bezu. According to Reb Yirmiyah, what Reb Shimon ben Lakish, the machlokes, the way Shimon ben Lakish explains machlokes of Shimon and the Rabbana, is that no, Reb Shimon always holds his kol shul. Doesn't make a difference whether it's a chit or kamach. He holds it's kosher. But MS, if you take that to its logical conclusion, it would come out that it's not just by tavel. By all these Surya Achila, Reb Shimon would hold that it's only a kosher. So those are the two shittas. So now the Mishnah, the Gemara brings a eye from the Mishnah. That from the Mishnah is mashma like Reb Bibi, like the first day, that it's only by chita that Reb Shimon says kosher, because you've got a barrier. It's the way it was created. But were it to be kamach, were it to be some other thing, then taki, you need the kazayas. What's the raya from the Mishnah? So we see he quotes the Mishnah. Now we learn to the Mishnah. Reb Shimon says the chachamim. You tell me, you hold that it's a kazayas that you need to eat in order to be oivam tava. You for sure will be moida to me that you ate an ant, right? That you'll be chayiv even though it's not a kazayas. In other words, that was a given. Reb Shimon understood that even the Rabbanim are asking because it's a barrier. So Amrullah, the chacham said to him, yeah, you're right. The reason why I would agree to you that by Namala, by eating an ant is an exception, you don't need to be eat a kazayis in order to be over the 5 or 6 lavin that they are by eating an ant, is because it's the way it was created. You're eating it just the way it is. It's alive, it's a whole thing. So Shimon says back, we learned this in the Mishnah already. This is just a quote from the Mishnah. Shimon said back, chita is also the way it grows, it's the way it's created. So you should also be chayav even if there's no kazayas. Period. That is the argument backwards and forwards. Ultimately, the Chacham said back that it has to be brias neshama. It has to have neshama. Chita doesn't have, it's not alive, so therefore it's not considered a burial, and you're not going to be chayav. But from Reb Shimon's words, it's clear that his kindness to them was that chita is a burial. Which mashma that chita and kamach loy. Only a chita would Reb Shimon hold is kosher, but kamach loy. And it's a riot to the shit of Reb Bibi that the whole machlokes is only the chita, but by other things, even Reb Shimon would agree you need a kazayas, and the kasha against Lafora Reb Yirmiyah who says kamach loy is bezu, kach machlokes is bezu. So the Gemara says no riot. Why not? Loy. Sorry. Ledivreim ka'amalu. No, Rabbi Amos, Rav Shimon himself holds that it's you always chayav a kolshu. Any isra achila is a kolshu, and this is what he meant to say. Ledidi afilu kamach nami. But Amos, what Rav Shimon was telling the Rabban is like this. I hold that even kamach as well. It doesn't matter what type of food it is. You chayav on a kolshu. But you, who evidently don't, you hold of the concept of the kazayas. In the case of teva, where you eat a chita, you should at least agree to me in such a case that a kolshu is okay, that it's kibriyasa. That's what he's saying. The Rabban, what the Rabban answer? The Rabban basically answer, no, it's only the mola, which is a birius neshama, which is it's alive, but chita is not considered a barrier, and therefore you only chayav for kazayas. So the kids, we said there's no raya from the Mishnah because the Mishnah could be either way. Either the Mishnah is Reb Shimon's true opinion that chita is chayav kosher because it's kibriyasa, but if it was kamach, then it would would need a kazayas. Or alternatively, the Mishnah could be saying that he's not saying his true opinion. He's saying that you Rabbanan should at least agree to me by chita. But I myself would hold even by kamach is a kosher. Okay. Tanya kavasa Rabbi Yirmiyah. Finally, the Brisa continues that Tanya kavasa Rabbi Yirmiyah, we have a Brisa which is in accordance to Rabbi Yirmiyah Shita. What does the Brisa say? The Brisa is quoted in Gemara in various different places, in Ozer and Shavuos and Megillah. But the Brisa says as follows: Reb Shimon oima kol shul Makkos. Reb Shimon says a blanket statement: kol shul Makkos. In order to get Malkus, all you need to do is eat a kol shul. Loy amru kazayis al in carbon. The whole din of a kazayis is only the Indian carbon. So this is a raya for Rabbi Yirmiyah. The Achronim ask a kasha, and I didn't look it up to see what the answer is, but I'm just putting it out there. That why Tani Kavasa Rabbi Yirmiyah, it's more than just a Tani Kavasa Rabbi Yirmiyah. It's a kasha. The Bride is not just a raya to Rabbi Yirmiyah; it's a kasha against Rabbi Bibi. So the Achronim asked that question: why the Gemara in the Naseach uses nuskos Tani Kavasa Rabbi Yirmiyah? Should have said even stronger that it should have asked as a kasha against Rabbi Bibi, because Rabbi Bibi says machlokes is only bechitza, not by kamach, and this Brisa seems to say that it's a blanket rule that kol shul Makkos and kazayis is only by carbon. Okay, that is the first piece of the Gemara. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says machlokes bechitza shi kibriyasa. It's the way it's created. That's the shit of Rabbi Bibi, but not by kamach. And Rabbi Yirmiyah says no, kach machlokes bezu. Whatever the machlekes is, the same applies. The kamak the ksav Reb Shimon b'chol yishon kol shul Makkos. Shimon holds a blanket rule kol shul Makkos. Lomer kazayis alin common. Shikis kol shalach l'meishim sin is halach l'meishim sin. That's what Rashi says. By the way, the Ritva says a very nice svara. Why there should be a difference? Not just halach l'meishim sin. A very nice svara. Why there should be a difference between Makkos and carbon? He says that is. But MS the Torah when it says don't eat is telling you there has to be a kazayis. But when you eat less than the kazayis, there's the inyan of akshava. You're basically saying that I don't care. I want to eat it despite the fact that it's not a kazayis. Usually you only want to eat kazayis. That's a normal akida. But if you're eating less than the kazayis, you're saying that this is a kashava akida for you. So therefore you chayav malchus by mezid. But by carbon, where it's b'shoiga, you can't say the svar of akshava. You're eating a b'shoiga. You didn't even know what you were doing. So there's no svar of akshava. So therefore you go back to the general rule of kazayis. Anyway, okay. Now we see the Mishnah of the next Mishnah. The Mishnah is more examples, right? So the Eloi and Aloikim, we had the first Mishnah. This is really a continuation of other cases where you get Malchus. Ha'oichel bikurim actually karaleh. A kohen, in other words, right? Who eats bikurim actually karaleh. He eats bikurim before you've done kriya, before you've said the psukim, which the Yisroel says over his bikurim. Another case, so there's Malchus to that. Koche kachim chutz the Klein. Someone eats koche kachim. Means even the kohen is allowed to eat koche kachim, but if he eats a chutz the Klein outside of the curtains of the Mishkan or in the Beis Hamikdash, it's outside of the walls of the Harabayis. Yeah, or kachim kalim or ma'is sheni chutz the Klein, or alternatively kachim kalim or ma'is sheni outside of the wall of Yerushalayim. And again, so kachim kalim outside of the Klein means even if you have a right to eat the kachim kalim, it's part of the animal which you're allowed to eat. But if you eat it chutz l'chayim, it's a problem. For that ma'isa sheni chutz l'chayim, you're going to be chayav malchus. And similarly, the pesach hatoy, if you break a bone, the pesach hatoy has to be a kosher karim pesach. How is that look? The pasuk is v'atzim leishpruva, you're not allowed to break a karim pesach. You're not allowed to break the bone of the karim pesach. So you get for all these examples, how is that look? You get malchus. Aval, however, there's two cases where we don't get malchus. Haval amoisir b'tor. If you do noisar, you leave over the carbon until the next morning. So as mentioned in previous Gemaras, Bryces, where we say because it's a lavanit asay, or because it's a shasafik, or because whatever the reason may be, there's no malchus. There's like three different options. But bottom line, everybody agrees that by noisar, there's no malchus. Let's just assume it's because it's a lavanit asay, so therefore there's no malchus. So it's lav shem b'maisa. So there's no malchus by a moiser b'toy, by a shoiver b'tomei ein alei karboim. Similarly, someone who breaks the bone of a karm pesach, but the karm pesach was tomei anyway, ein alei karboim. The reason is because it says boy, so we learn boy means bekasher v'lei b'psur. And noitel eimel abanim, let's finish the Mishnah, will be Rashi. And noitel eimel abanim, someone who takes the mother while it's over the children. We've already seen this Mishnah quoted earlier, but here we see it inside. Rabbi Yehuda says you get Malkus, and you don't need to send the mother. In other words, you've already been over the lav. It's not a lav anitik lasei. So once you know claim abanim, is a lav. You get Malkus. There's nothing else you can do to fix it up. The say no. There's a way of fixing up the lav. If you send, or you have the possibility of sending, like we said earlier. So then you can not be loyal because it's a lav anitik lasei. Zakal comes to loisas shesh b'kumase and chayavna. Any loisas which has a kumase has a way of fixing it up, remedying the loisas by doing an asay. So ein chayavna. There's no Malkus. It's the principle of lav anitik lasei. So it's not pshat that Yehuda doesn't hold of lav anitlase. When he says lo kivin mashach, he just holds it. Shiloh hakan is not an example of lav anitlase, as we'll soon see in Rashi, and the Chacham say it is. But they both agree that were it to be a lav anitlase, there wouldn't be Malkus. Yehuda just considers it that it's not a lav anitlase, as we'll soon see in Rashi. Why not? So go now. Let's see Rashi in the beginning. Actually, Karlin Arami over the Gemara Yalef Heichon Huzah. The Gemara is going to learn out where Heichon Huzah. Where do we see that the Kohen is not allowed to eat the Bikurim before the Kriya? Where's their lav for such a thing? Even if there's an assay, where's the lav? Another example, again, the Gemara is going to have to explain where it says, because it doesn't seem to be a fair shalav which tells the kohen that he's not allowed to eat the kachim kachim outside of the Klein. Although there's an assay, there doesn't seem to be a lav, and in order to get Malkus needs to be a lav. So Rashi is addressing the issue and saying the Gemara will explain where the lav is. Kachim kalim chutz l'chayma as rasim lo yisuchal lecha b'sharecha. Says all these different things. Became Ma'aser Sheni. Well, the Gemara Parek, the Gemara is going to ask, no, this Amad ben different Amad, Ma'aser Sheni Tana Le'el, Ma'aser Sheni V'Agdish Le'nifta. The Chor is a repetition. Mishnah, the first Mishnah we learned, said Ma'aser Sheni V'Agdish Le'nifta. What does that mean? It means you didn't redeem it and you ate it outside of Yerushalayim. So here you're just saying the same thing, different words. Ma'aser Sheni Chutz L'chayim. What's going on? Behind the Shachar Chutz L'chayim. With the opinion, why is there a repetition? The Gemara is going to deal with that question. Hamoitzi B'Torah in Eloi Kidam Labar Chassid Naseh Achaloy Saseh V'Cholus Lavan Naseh. Hashoiver Etzem B'Tamei. You break a tummy dick a carbon Pesach's bone, you are parted from Makkos. Why? Because the Gemara says the word voy tells me the kosher like possibly only get Makkos for breaking a bone of a kosher carbon Pesach, but not for a tame or otherwise apostle carbon Pesach. Now going to the Shiloh Hakan, Rabbi Yehuda says why not? Before it's a lav anitik lasei. So Rashi explains Kesava he holds shalech me karamash. When the pasuk says shalech to shalach esaim, it means it's a mitzvah lasei to send the mother instead of taking it. Not if you take it, then you have to send it. No, it's a mitzvah lasei. But ain't kan lav shenit lasei. It's not lav shenit lasei. The Avgav says shalech to shalech achaloisik. Even though the pasuk says shalech to shalech after the pasuk, after the words loisikach, so it sounds like don't take it, and if you do. Lav lememredim l'kakat shalech. Rabbi Yehuda holds this doesn't mean to say that if you took the aim from the banim on top of the banim while it's on the banim, then you have to send it away. You don't take it. Rather, shalech to shalach, it's an asay, and it's asi shekadmu l'lav. It's therefore it's not a lav anitik nasay, and therefore you get Malkus. That's the shit of Rabbi Yehuda. It's not considered lav anitik nasay. The chachamim shalech and eloki kesavi. The chachamim hold shalech achalaki chamashma. The pshat in the pasuk points to the chachamim is loy sikach, and if you did take, you need to send it, and therefore the lav shenitik nasay, therefore it falls squarely into the category of lav shenitik nasay. And ordinarily you're going to not get Malkus because it's a lav shenitik nasay. Again, were you to be mevatel lasay, point to Rabbi Yechon or point to Shlakish, you were mekayim. In other words, you were loikia. In other words, point to Shlakish, Bezin ordered you to send the mother and you didn't. You would get Malkus in such an instance. And according to Rabbi Yechon, I believe that halacha follows, if you shechted the animal, the mother, and now it's no longer possible for you to do that thing, then the chura you would be able to get Malkus as we've seen in the previous Gemara. We said those for Oidakaras, Shiloh Hakam was an example that was everyone agreed that you sometimes get Malkus if you mevatel lesson. Okay, that is the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, you should know that the beginning of the Mishnah, going on the first case of the Mishnah, you get Malkus, the Kohen gets Malkus or eating Bikurim before Kriya, it's not muskim. It's not everyone agrees to this. This is the words of Rabbi Kiva, meaning that the Mishnah was soisim and didn't say his name, like it's Taka the Derech in many places that the Mishnah quotes the words of Rabbi Kiva without saying his name. We should know everyone else holds, the Chacham hold, Bikurim hanocha makaves ben kriyei makaves ben. The MS, no, it's only hanocha makaves ben. The Kohen only gets allowed for eating the Bikurim early if it's before hanocha, before it was placed by the Mizbeach. But Kriya, if it's before the time of Kriya, ei makaves ben, he can taka eat it, or at least he doesn't get allowed. I think Rishonim say it's still not supposed to, but It's not ma'aka, meaning if he does eat it, there's no malchus, there's no issa. So says Rabbi Avraham Rabbi, you should know this Mishnah only goes according to Rabbi Kiva. The Chacham Taka argue and say you wouldn't get malchus for eating it actually karalem, only if it was before the hanacha, before putting the bikurim by the mizbeh. Okay, that's statement of Rabbi Avraham Rabbi. The Gemara Kasha, the lamas who did Rabbi Shimon Sisimta. The Gemara Kasha, why telling me it's Rabbi Kiva? I don't know anywhere that Rabbi Kiva holds such a thing. Rabbi Shimon Taka, we'll soon see in a brayse, it says befeirush that you're not allowed to eat bikurim, that there's a lav and you get malchus for eating bikurim before the kriya. So why are you telling me it's Rabbi Kiva? Why are you, Rabbi Chana, telling me it's Rabbi Kiva? You should say it's Rabbi Shimon. We know beferish is Rabbi Shimon. Why you're assuming it's Rabbi Kiva and Taka? Maybe it is Rabbi Kiva. And you know you makabel that it was Rabbi Kiva somehow. But why say that? Say it's Rabbi Shimon, where there's a first Rabbi, which tells me that Rabbi Shimon holds as I, not like the Chacham. So when I says Taka, how kamashman the Rabbi Kiva? Rabbi Shimon Sirle. Rabbi Chana wants to tell me chiddush. Didn't want to just tell me something that we all knew that was in the brayse. He wanted to tell me that Rabbi Kiva holds that Rabbi Shimon. It's not just Rabbi Shimon, it's also Rabbi Kiva. Okay, period. That's really the end of that Kash and Teretz. And now the Gemara just says, my Rabbi Shimon, where do we see that Rabbi Shimon holds? Is of the opinion that Bikurim, Yuchai of Malchus, a Kohen is Chai of Malchus for eating the Bikurim before the Kriya, even after the Hanacha, unlike the Chacham who say that once there was Hanacha, once the Bikurim was placed by the Mizbech, there's no law. My Rabbi Shimon, the Tanya as follows. There's a brayse which says as follows. But Trumas Yadcha Elu Bikurim. It's a long pasuk, basically. You see the Oizvahada Allah. You're not allowed to eat b'sharecha, but Pashas means b'sharecha means outside of Yerushalayim. Master the gun, chatirosh, kavizrecha, all these different things. The choyres, karka, b'tzayin, kavachol, the recha, the davas, basically the darim, the davas, the choyres, meiser, all sorts of things. And then the answer is trumas yatva. Now, what all these things mean, the Bryce is going to elaborate on. But the Shimon is actually dorish this pasuk from the Sefer L'Reish. It starts off with the Sefer and says like this: trumas yatva elu bikurim. Trumas yatva refers to bikurim. Can't be. Even though the pasuk uses the lashon trumas yatva, it can't be too much truma. Hey, where do we see such a thing? The truma has to be eaten inside Yerushalayim as opposed to outside. There's no such thing. It's just a kohen that eat truma, no one else. So he says trumas yatva is talking about elu bikurim. It's talking about bikurim, and we learn that out from the word yodcha. That if I remember correctly, that it's talking about bikurim. Right? It says in the pasuk, "V'locha kakoyin atanim yodecha." So the word yodecha is used here and it's used there. So we know that just like over there it's bikurim, so also over here it's referring to bikurim. So trumas yadcha bikurim is coming to tell you that lo yisuch alecha b'sharecha, etc. Trumas yadcha can't be eaten outside of Yerushalayim. Says Reb Shimon, that can't be pshat in the pasuk. I'm Reb Shimon, my bazel l'amdein. It can't be coming to teach me the simple thing that you're not allowed to eat bikurim outside Yerushalayim. Why? If you're telling me that you're not allowed to eat the bikurim outside Chutz L'choima and you get the malchus for it, it's kal v'choima m'imaisa kal. So just before we go further, just put on the side that l'chora, what's this taina? We know ein oinshim and ein masir and you don't learn out of a kal. The Gemara will deal with that later. But for the moment, let's put that question on the side. What Rav Shimon is saying is that if it's us and you get malchus for eating meiser outside of Yerushalayim, like the pasuk starts off, lo yisuch alech b'shraka meiser the gun, because about meiser sheni outside of Yerushalayim, kal v'choimer is going to be the case for bikurim, which is more chama. And therefore that can't be pshat in the pasuk. The pasuk wouldn't need to tell me that. What's the kal, what's the chama, that also the Gemara will deal with later. At the moment Shimon is assuming that bikurim is more chamor than ma'isa sheini. And if ma'isa sheini is not allowed to be eaten outside Yerushalayim, kavachayim bikurim is not allowed. Yeah, kavachayim ma'isa kal. Ma ma'isa kal oit plus l'chayim loik. So when he eats it outside of the wall gets malchus. Bikurim. If you eat bikurim loik koshik, it isn't the kavachayim. So then what's taka pshat? Haloi ba'akasav elo lo'oichim bikurim actually koraleh. She'll like it. Yeah. That even if it's before Kriya, you like it. And in other words, it's Me'ena Indian, yeah? So Me'ena Indian, you can't be talking, you're not allowed to eat in outside of Yerushalayim, the Bikurim, because that's Kal V'chayim from Ma'aseh Sheni, you're not allowed to eat. It must be Me'ena Indian, L'chutz L'chayim, T'neu Indian, L'fnei Kriya. That even before Kriya, and not like the Chacham who say that once he's a Hanacha by the Mizbeach, the Klein's already allowed to eat it. No. There's Malchus and there's a Lav, even if actually Korale, she'll like it. This really ends the part of the brayse which is negeh to us, right? That Reb Shimon is the one who holds, like Rabbi Kiva, and like our Mishnah is Reb Shimon, and Mishnah is Rabbi Kiva who says that you're not allowed to eat bikurim actually koraleh. There's a law for doing so. But now, since we brought the brayse, we continue with other things that the brayse says. Yeah, the nidveisecha zu toida or shlami. So when he says in the pasuk nidveisecha yunedava zu toida shlami, toida shlami sometimes can be a chiyuv, but often on the dava. And therefore, we understand that Nidveisecha refers to Toido Shlamim. What's it coming to tell me? If it's coming to tell me that you're not allowed to eat outside Yerushalayim, kipashta the kras, the pasuk simply seems to be saying kavachayim ma'aser, kavachayim ma'aser. Ma'aser is cow, right? So you can understand. Mashenkin, this is mamish karbanis, this is more chamor. So you don't need me to tell you that. It's coming to tell me that even the Baalim are allowed to eat the taidush and shlamim. That if they eat it lifnei zrika, then they get malchus. If you eat it, if Nezrika, there's a malchus even b'toich Yerushalayim. Okay, but we'll see Rashi. B'choyer is that b'choyer is first shut it to b'choyer, first born animal which you bring to the base of Hamikdash. Amr Shem Mabaz Elam Dein. Im la'oich l'chutz l'chayim is coming to tell me keep hashed the that you're not allowed to eat outside Yerushalayim. Kavachayim ma'aser, kavachayim from ma'aser sheni. Im if Nezrika is coming to tell me that you're not allowed to eat it before Zrika. Kavachayim mitay d'shlamim. Rather, it's coming to tell me that Azar, who eats the Bechar even after Zrika, gets malchus. The Karka B'tzayin Chazuk Chatas La'asham. The Karka B'tzayin refers to Chatas and Asham. Rashi will explain how we get to that conclusion. I think he will. Let's just check. If not, I'll explain. No. I think there's no other thing that we can explain it to mean over here. In the context, it's understood that it's a katas and asham because like a process of elimination. And what's it coming to teach us? If it's coming to, you're not allowed to eat outside of Yerushalayim, you don't need to tell me that. There's no like, even if Nezrika, if you're going to tell me that it's telling me that the kohen is not allowed to eat it before Zrika, Kavachayim Mitay Shlamim. In the Achazrika, if you're going to tell me that the Achazrika, the Azar can't eat it, it's Kavachayim B'chor, Kavachayim from B'chor. Haloi Ba'akazu Elo Oichom Nechatos Ba'asham Afilu LaAchazrika Chutz LeKlein Shulek. It's coming to tell me that you don't need to be outside of Yerushalayim, even if it's outside of the Klein, outside of the curtains. No matter outside of the Kaisel of Rabbi, when there's a base of Hamikdash. So even if it's LaAchazrika, and even if it's a kohen who's allowed to eat it, the Seichakam, if it's Chutz LeKlein, he gets malchus. Again, Rashi will explain exactly why we choose these examples. The Darecha Zu Oila, the pasuk says in the Darecha Zu Oila. He says in the Darecha, he refers to Oila, which is normally a person gives it the ned, Torah's ned. I'm going to hurry out like oila. It's I say I want to give an oila, and it's a neder, which means it's not an adava. It's a neder, meaning that I take it upon myself, and if this animal something happens to it, I'm going to come what may. I'm going to right. That's the difference between a ned and a adava. The ned the chai b'chayis and the adava, you know. The derech zu oila. It can't be coming to tell me that you're not allowed to eat the oil outside of the foot. If it's to tell you that you're not allowed to eat it before Zrika, if it's going to tell me that the Akazrika, Cesar can't eat it, it's Kavakayim B'chayim. If you're coming to tell me that even the Kayin can't eat it, oil has to be totally burnt, but there's no law which tells me the Farish that you're not allowed to eat, that the Kayin is not allowed to eat the oil even after the Zrika, even bifnim. So this law we use for such things, like a period. So we'll stop over here, we'll do Rashi. This is where we'll stop. So it says Rashi, Trumas Yadcha Elu Bikurim. Already a little bit further. Yeah, we're further back. Let's go back. Zudiv Rebbe Kiva, yeah? From the beginning of the Gemara. Zudiv Rebbe Kiva. Masnisan Diktani Bikurim, Kriya Makavis Bur Rebbe Kiva says Rebbe Bakan and Rebbe Kiva, Shayurogil Rebbe listening to our Mishra Bistam Kamakanis. Bahachi Shamil Rebbe Yechon. Rashi explains how did Rebbe Yechon know this? There's no brisa, at least not according to Rashi. There's no brisa which says Bahachi Shamil Rebbe Yechon had the Kabbalah that this was Rebbe Kiva Shitz, the Isla Rebbe Kiva, the Kriya Makavis Bikurim. Hanocha Lifnei Mizbeach, so but not like the Chacham. The Chacham say Hanocha Lifnei Mizbeach Makavis Ben the Shana Bakra. The pasuk says twice. V'nichol Lifnei v'nafter Lifnei says Shana Katzul Akriv is Kal by Kachim. Rashi seems to be learning this is chat over here as well by Bikurim. So because the Torah says v'nichol twice, so that's why the Chachamim say that Hanoch is Makavis, but Kriya is not Makav. Why is Kriya not Makav? Before he doesn't hold like the whole drush of Reb Shimon in the next brayso. But so now the Gemara's name is Udiv Reb Shimon. If you want to say that it's not the Chacham, say it's Reb Shimon, where we have a brayso which Beferish says that Reb Shimon holds is the Kamon, the Shamin Reb Shimon, but we take here the Reb Shimon holds the Isli Kimasnis and the Kriya Makav, but Reb Shimon clearly holds over there the Kriya is Ma'akav, and if the Kohen eats Bikurim before Kriya, he's Ayvala. My Reb Shimon. What is the Reb Shimon? Where do we hear the Reb Shimon said this? So we're on the first wide line. Trumas Yodcha, end of the line. Trumas Yodcha, say for the high crow. It's the end of this passage. In the second or Shumas Yas, but Darish of Shimon the Kam is safe for the Reish. Shimon's Darish to come from the Sefer to the Reish, starting off with understanding the Sefer. The other Darish Reish the Sefer like Midrash Kagam, you wouldn't be able to be Darish. It's only if you assume that the Reish is telling me Kipshutai, so then you have a kasha. What's the Sefer? What's the end of the passage doing? And that way he learns something out of each din. Well, the kamei mefarshina. Trumas yad chayil bikurim dichsibel hakayin tanim yodecha. Since he uses the word yodecha by bikurim, and he also says the word yodecha, we understand that trumas yad refers to bikurim. Im la eichel bikurim chutz l'chayim. Now, it can't mean kipshot that bikurim chutz l'chayim is also lesser kidam mashmakra, like the meaning of the pasuk is lesser kolach b'shag b'gayim because kavachayim ma'isakal. That way you will be able to learn from a kavachayim from Maisa, which is more lenient. Shai ksiv b'tchilas hamikra Maisa the gon. Kamei mefarish ma'chayim. Sorry. Yeah, later on the Gemara will explain Taka what is the chayim of Bikurim over Maisa, but Taka more chamor, and therefore, if in the Maisa you're not allowed to eat outside the chayim for sure Bikurim, and therefore that cannot be what the pasuk is sticking from Masiyat Chayil Bikurim in this pasuk for. So what is it? Actually, Karlin, tell me the din that you're not allowed to eat Bikurim. Actually, Karlin, what's Karlin? And Rami Evidavi before the Baal reads Arami Evidavi. The main in Chutz L'chaim. How does this work? Before it's not talking about it. So Pshat is the main in Chutz L'chaim. If the pasuk can't be talking about Chutz L'chaim because you learn how to have a chayim from Maisa, so now in the Issa Akaroy land to a different Issa, which is the Issa Roy actually current. Then we go on and we say Nidvisachos Zutayda Shlamim. And what's it going to be talking about? So we say it's talking about Eichel Tayda Shlamim Ifnei Zrika, that even though you're allowed to eat Tayda Shlamim once, it's only Lachazrika, but not Ifnei Zrika, that you like it. The main in Chutz L'chaim, it's in Kash. This is the most Isadik Chamadik Is you could do. You give it. And we know somewhere else that you're not allowed to do it from an assay. There's no Beferish Hazara. So therefore we say this is the most chamerdik thing, which is right. We know it's asar, but we don't know there's a lab, so we assume that this is what the lab is referring to. The assay is the dams of It says the basar that you spill out the dam of the karbanis, and only then you can eat the basar. We don't have a lab for it, so we say that this is the lab, and therefore there's malchus. Right. Now we're going on to the next case, which is b'chayr, zeh. If it's before Zrika, Kavakayim Teshlam, Loi Barkas, Elohim Nabchaya Filu La'achazri. Kavakayim Teshlam, come in Farish My Chumid, the Bchayim Teshlam. More later with attack saying what's attack of the Chumra of the Chayr more than Teshlam that we say to Kavakayim Teshlam, they can't be talking about Lifnei Zrika. So what is it talking about? Afilu La'achazri Kashur like Im Zarhu, meaning if he's a Zar, he's not allowed to eat Teshlamim. Sorry, not allowed to eat B'chayr. B'chayr we're talking about after Zrika. Right? She'ein of Koyin Akla L'Koyin, Zri as a Rasai. Well, not come assay from somewhere else. We know it's already assay from an assay. The ashkom ba'ach b'koy shoy b'sarm yelachad. That only a kain is allowed to eat. Im lo eichel achazrika. Now we're going on to, I believe, oila. Chatzis v'asham. Sorry, chatzis v'asham. That is like. So what Mabaz Lamdena when it says B'karach v'schein chatzis v'asham, it can't be talking about eichel plus l'chaim because it can't be from mice. It can't be talking about Neiz Rika because it can't be from Tayda v'shlamim. If it's achazrika. So Ali Barkasov Ella La'oichlon Chutz Li La'achazrika Chutz Klein. Right? Says Rashi Im La'oichl Afilu La'achazrika should be there. So Im La'oichl Achazrika B'Huzar Kavachayim B'Chayis Kavachayim from B'Chayr. That Achazrika Zar can't eat. So the coming parish might come with the Chatzim B'Chayr. Chutz. So what's taku we say? We say Chutz Klein. That the Klein is not allowed to eat it after Zrika Chutz Klein. As far as I say, Matzina B'Makom Acham B'Makom Kodesh Toika B'Chatzar Elmer. He has to be eaten in B'Makom Kodesh. So therefore we know that you're not allowed it, but there's no lab. So we say that this is what the pasuk is referring to. That is with regard to Chatas Vash. And then we moved on to Oilan. There's a Recha's Oilan. We said it can't be talking about all these different things. Chutz l'chaim because Kavachayim mice. It can't be talking about Lifnei Zrika. In other words, that a kain's not that you're not allowed to eat it before Zrika. Even the person is allowed to eat it because Kavachayim Tayda Shlam. Achazrika that you're not allowed to eat it. Zar it's Kavachayim B'Chayr. If it's Chutz l'chaim that a kain can't eat it Chutz l'chaim, that's Kavachayim Chatas Vasham. So what could it be? It must be telling me that even Rifnim Linakayim, Alachazrika, you're not allowed to eat an oila because it's supposed to all be burnt. Says Rashi, V'lo'oichel oila filu la'achazrika, v'afilu kayin shulaika, v'azhara is assay, ashkom ba'am, we can't find as hard as assay, but orku b'nei Aaron kol, which means it has to be totally burnt, but lo'ila achila. But here, over here, in this passage, lo'isukal, we're saying that there's also a lamb. Okay, so we're in the middle of a sugya, but it's a good place to start. And when we come back after Pesach, we'll do a little bit of a recap of the end of the Amud at least, so that we'll know what we're talking about. But we're up to Daf Yazayin Base, second line.